Hi, I'm Peggy Farren. Welcome to the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Hey, we're going to talk about a newsletter today. And if it sounds boring to you, come on, just listen, because it's really, 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 really important. Heather Musingo, our producer of the Understand Photography Show, is my co-host, not my guest, today. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, but of course I have to do my little thing. I want to make sure that you guys know our website is understandphotography.com. We have tons of information on that website. We've worked so hard. We have, 170 articles. No, we have more than that. We probably have over 200 articles on there. How-to articles, all about photography, all falling within our motto of we simplify the technical. There's a little search at the top right. You'll see a search, a little magnifying glass. Let's say you want to learn about white balance. You can type in white balance and see what articles we have about that, or metering modes. A lot of these times, we have two different Facebook groups, and we encourage you to join them. Of course, they're free. One of them is Understand Photography Group, so it's facebook.com/groups/understand photography, and the other one is facebook.com/groups/sell your photography. So we have those two groups, and a lot of times people ask questions, and I just look up the article that I know we already wrote. Either Joe wrote it or I wrote it. Tom Tracy contributes a lot, photographer Tom Tracy. We have a lot of how-to articles right on our website. A lot of them at this point accompanied, I can't say the word, by video. So we've been really focusing on video for the last we've been doing the show for 3 years now. So 3 years, is that right?
A little more than 3.
3.5 years, right? We started in August. 3.5 years, wow. So we've got the show, but we also have the Tuesday photo tips, and we've got some other how-to tips in there as well. When you go to the website, again, it's understandphotography.com. The first thing you're going to see, it says click here for freebies. Go ahead and click that. Download, one of the freebies. We've got a lot of interesting things, and then you'll be put on our mailing list, which leads right into welcome, Heather Musingo.
Thanks, Peggy.
And so why do I want to put them on my mailing list?
So they get your newsletter.
That's right. Because that is something that we didn't put in the questions. Who do you send a newsletter to? I mean, we're going to talk about all your questions, but let's talk about that first.
So our audience.
Who's your
the
audience
for your newsletter?
Let's say I'm just starting out. Oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be answering the questions. I'm used to asking the questions. All right, but I'll do both. Let's say I'm just starting out. Let's say I just retired from my job, and I have always been a hobbyist photographer, and I'm a pretty good photographer, and I want to sell my work. I win a lot of awards at the Camera Club, and everybody says I should be selling my work, so I'm going to start selling my work. I've made the decision. I've gone through Peggy's classes on how to sell your artwork, at least our boot camp. Then I don't know anybody. Who am I going to send a newsletter to? Do you know?
People that sign up for it on your website.
Well, that's why this is the first thing on my website. That newsletter is the most important marketing tool I have. And I have always had a newsletter from the minute I started my business. The minute, maybe not the minute, but the day I started my business, it started with a newsletter. So the hardest thing for people starting out is figuring out who to send the newsletter to. And I'm not kidding. There's nothing wrong with sending it to your mom, to your kids, to people in your camera club, if you belong to a camera club. Sorry, I know I'm doing that, but it's right in my face. Start off small and then build from there. So how do you collect names? Are you doing art shows? You're collecting names. You should have a sign-in sheet at an art fair. If you have a gallery opening, even if it's, if you go to an opening from your camera club, let's say you're hanging pictures, You should be there and ask people if they want to be on your mailing list. When Joe and I go to the camera clubs, we just put a clipboard and says, sign up for the Understand Photography mailing list, and people sign up.
That's great.
I mean, it costs no money. So I am always, always, always thinking of ways to add people to my mailing list. You have to have permission. You have to have permission, at least implied permission. So if you call me or email me and say, hey, I want to take some photography classes, or I might want to go on a tour, and then you never even hire me, you're going on my list because you have expressed interest in my company. Now, the different softwares that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, they make it very easy for people to unsubscribe if they don't want to be on your list. But you've got to be careful. If people mark your emails as spam, you're going to be like cut off. You won't be able to send them out. So just keep that in mind. Maybe I'll have more points on that, but
Okay.
let's go into your questions. I just realized that is a really hard thing for people starting out. They don't know.
Right, how you get the emails.
Yeah. So I'm sure I'll think more as we're going, because my brain will kick in.
Okay, so let's start with a purpose. Why are we sending out? Why is it a good idea to use a newsletter?
Well, it wasn't my idea. When I first started working for my dad, when I was in my 20s, I felt very insecure in that world. My dad had a medium-sized software company, but I had always been a waitress or a bartender. I had never worked in the professional world. I was not highly educated. I don't have a college degree. I felt really, I don't know, insecure.
Intimidated?
I just felt stupid. So I started reading business books. And every single business book, in fact, I went to Dale Carnegie public speaking class. I went to Dale Carnegie's sales course. I took a lot of those, I forgot what the name of the company was, but they had these one-day workshops all the time. I listened to these sales cassette tapes in my car back then. But the books, everyone said have a newsletter. They all did.
It's one of the easiest marketing tools.
So why do they all say that? Is because you keep yourself in front of the customer. So when I first started my company, which at that time was called Avant-Garde Video Productions, because I was just the first year of business, I just offered wedding videos. That's the only thing I offered. And I had a one-piece newsletter. So it was back to front. It was typed up with little cheesy icons because there were no photographs in it, because I just did it in black and white because it was so expensive. So I printed it 2 sides so that it would fold up in 3s, trifold, and I took it to the printer, and then they would run it off and fold it. They put the little piece of tape on it and the stamp and mailed it bulk mail. And at that time, I was targeting the event managers, catering managers, people who could give me weddings, because I was only selling myself to weddings. And here in Florida, at least in Naples, that's where you get the weddings, is by being on those preferred vendor lists for them to recommend you, because most people are coming here as destination weddings, so it's a little bit different marketing. But that was how I established my first mailing list. I just sat there and, we did have the internet back then, even though it was kind of cryptic, but I would type in, try to find out who the catering managers were. So that cost me $500 a quarter to send that one little sheet out. It was so expensive. And I didn't have any money. I started off broke when I started but I knew how important that was, and it really was. Because there was one lady, when I worked for Kelly, we worked at the Ritz-Carlton almost every Saturday. I was there for 3 years. And this woman, she just didn't like me. She made it clear. She never acknowledged my existence. I was in there as Kelly's assistant. So she never even acknowledged that I lived. She didn't look at me. It was like I wasn't there, right? And so I ran into her, and I didn't get into the Ritz. I never worked there my first year or two in business. Eventually I finally got in there, but not the first couple of years. But I ran into her, and she actually acknowledged my existence. And I forget what I said. And she said, I know, I get your newsletter. I thought, she reads my newsletter? But because it's rare, people read it.
Okay.
Now that was a mailed newsletter, which is even more mailed.
Right.
Because then once I learned about Constant Contact and ConvertKit, all these software programs, I switched because they're much cheaper. So Constant Contact, I think I'm at a high range with Constant Contact, and I pay like $130 a month. And I do my newsletter monthly now, but you can start off for free with MailChimp. So as long as your mailing list isn't too big, MailChimp is free. And that's what I recommend to everybody to start off. So I never answered your question.
Why should we send out a newsletter?
I don't know why I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. Okay, so it keeps your name, keeps your brand in front of your customers, right? That's the most important thing. I have a great example. I have lots of examples, but this is a fresh in my mind example. So 10 years ago, there was a man named Bill. He took one of my classes, and it was a lighting class. He was here, I forget, he's some kind of IT guy, and he was stationed here for like 6 weeks. So that was the only time I ever saw the guy. 10 years later, his wife signed up for the Tuscany trip. We just got back I guess by the time this airs, it's been a couple months. But so I always ask everyone, how did you find me? And she said, oh, my husband has been on your mailing list for all these years. He loved your class, so he stayed on your mailing list. Your newsletters are full of information he likes, so he stayed on my mailing list. I never heard from him ever at all for 10 years.
Wow.
And then, his wife signs up for one of our photo tours. So that's just one of many, many examples that I have. So keeping your name in front of people is the main thing. It's the most cost-effective marketing tool possible. I started to tell you about the $500, and now I think I pay $130 a month for Constant Contact, but my newsletter goes out to almost 10,000 people at this time. So it goes out to a lot of people, so that's more expensive. Constant Contact does nickel and dime you to death, so I've got all the pictures. Unless I want to take the pictures down all the time, I have to pay for the storage. I forget, so it's up to $130 a month. But that's still not as much money as I was spending for 150 people
to mail it.
It blows my mind. And then I make far more than $130 a month back. I make money every single newsletter that goes out. Somebody signs up for something. You can increase awareness about what's going on with your customers, with your company. You have new products, you have new services, or you can remind them about the products and services. One of the most important things for me in my newsletter is to get my schedule out, because my schedule's on the website. My website, understandphotography.com/schedule. It's a tab. I tell everybody, check our schedule. And people who have taken 10 classes with me will email me and say, when's the next sensor cleaning? Why don't you look at the schedule? They don't look at the schedule. So I have to put it in a newsletter because they like the reminders. Or something that, let's say, I'm trying to think of a product or service that I've had. Let's say the Old Naples photo tour. We've been doing that for 4 or 5 years, right? Every season. Mm-hmm. And somebody who's been on my mailing list for 10 years and comes to events and classes with me and goes on trips with me, and I'll say, oh, you should try the Old Naples photo tour. Oh, what's that about? I never heard of that. I'm thinking, how could they not have heard of it? So you kind of have to keep reminding people what you do because they don't pay attention. Yeah. What I do is important to me, but it's really not very important to my customers until they want something.
Until they want something,
Helps build relationships with your customers. They feel like they get to know you when you're sending stuff out. That's the whole reason we're doing this. When people know you, trust you, and like you, they're more apt to do business with you. So why are we doing this podcast? Same reason. We want to get our name out in front of people. We want people to remember. We want people to say, look, we're nice. You know, we're not scary people, we're nice, and we really do simplify the technical. Oh, what else? What else? Demonstrates expertise. So even back then in the video days with that one little page that I would type up, I would give tips. I would give video tips or tips about weddings. You know, one of the things was, you know, where I live here in Naples, Florida, most of our weddings are on the beach. So I wrote, actually this was after I was on Constant Contact, because I linked back to an article, but I wrote an article on my blog at the time on having a wedding, a beach wedding, just had nothing to do with video or anything else. It had tips in it like, don't have your guests facing the sun. You might think you want this beautiful sunset wedding, but if the sun is behind you, your guests aren't even going to be able to see. And then it talked about packing the sand or using carpet, because if you have a grandma that you want to be there, she can't walk on that soft sand.
And it's so hard in heels.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but I mean, it just had tips like that.
Right.
You know, and it shows that I was an expert at weddings, not just video.
Right.
Because I did transition after 1 year of doing video. I realized that I was never going to make enough money unless I added photography. And then eventually I gave up the video because that was the least profitable part of my business at the time. So the other thing that you brought up is it forces you to keep your website up to date.
Yes.
Because so last night I stayed up really late because I have got to get my newsletter out. I can't get my newsletter out until the schedule is all the way. I hand wrote the schedule, but I never put it on because it takes hours and hours to put it on the website. So I stayed up late and I got up early to finish it today I still don't have it completely finished, but I have it finished enough to put the newsletter out. So before I even do the newsletter, I have to make sure my schedule is done. If I know that let's say I want to teach somebody about weddings, I have to have that article done. Right. I have to have something new or fresh to offer to my customers. So it forces me to do that. Okay.
All right.
That's
so
all I
who
got.
is your customer? How do you find out who your customers are?
And that's like really, really important, because you have to gear your newsletter towards your customer. What are you selling is the way to start with that. Like if you're selling, for me, I'm mostly selling photography training at this point. So my newsletter reflects that. Yes, I still am a working photographer. We still do headshots. We do family portraits, but you don't see that in my newsletter because that's not my target. My target is I'm trying to sell classes and trips, it's all education, photography education. So I'm looking for people who want to learn photography. But specifically me, I'm looking for, it's not as much age as I'm looking for nature and fine art photographers, travel photographers. I have a lot of experience in portrait photography, but I don't tend to think of portrait photographers as my customers.
Okay.
That's not who, my training is not geared towards them. I have classes, of course the general classes are geared to any type of photographer, but really I'm targeting those type of people. Our customers would mostly be targeting fine art, people who are going to buy their artwork, because most of our customers want to sell their artwork. So you've got to think about, who's going to buy art. They're going to be a little older probably. They're going to have a little bit of money. So, one of the things they teach you I still read a lot of business books, and now I'm into podcasts, so I listen to a lot of business podcasts, but they talk about making your avatar of your perfect customer and giving her a name or him a name and everything. So my perfect customer is, let's say, I should say Denise, because I have a lot of Denises. Hello to all the Denises. But Denise is a woman. She's age 50 and up, probably. She's, upper middle class to wealthy. She's married. Most of my Denises are married. She loves photography, loves it, not just likes it. Most of them love it. you know, I mean, that's what you want to think about. You want to kind of like do a really, you know, really think about who your customer is, and then what do they want? What motivates them? What, you know, what can you give them that they want? You know, for me, I can give them education and experiences. So as a fine art photography, what can you give them? You can give them beautiful artwork, but why do people buy artwork? And this is a whole show on its own, but people buy artwork because they want something to decorate their home, yes, but they buy for emotional reasons. They want to say, hey, I got this from this artist who, you know, this great artist from Naples, Florida. I met him here, and he, you know, I don't know. They want a story to go with your art too.
Right. So
you have to think about your customer, and then you have to gear your newsletter towards your customer, or they're going to unsubscribe. And believe me, they're going to unsubscribe anyway. So get some thick skin going on, because every month I get at least 30 unsubscribes. So sometimes I'll look and I'll go, oh, you know,
what did I do wrong?
But you know what? Sometimes it's just that they have 2 email addresses and they're getting the newsletter twice. So this is driving me crazy today. My hair's going my face. All right, so you have to gear it towards your customer.
How often should we send one out?
Well, I send mine monthly. I think if you're just starting out, if you just do it even twice a year is better than nothing. But quarterly would be, I think, an ideal. If you're serious about selling your art, let's say, I think you should be sending it out quarterly. I think monthly is too much. For what I do, I don't think it's too much. If you're doing what I do, then you should probably be doing it monthly, because nobody reads the schedule. So I need to get that schedule out to them every month when they're going to make a decision if they're going to take a class or not. But quarterly, I think, is the ideal, because that's enough to let them say, oh, this person's not bombarding me, so I'm not going to unsubscribe. But it's enough to keep you fresh in their mind.
And quarterly is, oh, this is just a breath of fresh air. This is something different. I don't see it all the time, and they might take the time to read through it.
Good point. That's an excellent point. Now, I actually just watched a webinar last night I don't understand why, but it seems like everybody, all these online marketing people that I listen to their webinars and I take their classes, and they all want to just bombard their customers, like 2 or 3 emails a day. I don't understand that, because that's the fastest way in the world to make me unsubscribe.
Absolutely.
If I get more than 1 in a day, no matter how interested I am in this person, I unsubscribe. If you send me more than 1 in a day, that's crazy. Wayfair, I bought something off of Wayfair. They were sending me like 5 a day for 3 days in a row until I unsubscribed like 4 times. I had to unsubscribe. Then I started putting it in spam because it was crazy. I mean, nobody wants to, I don't understand.
We all get too many emails anyway.
That's my opinion, that you shouldn't do it more than once a month. But I don't know, all these people who are making a lot more money than me are saying to do it all the time. But.
All right, so what kind of information do we put in this once a month or quarterly newsletter?
All right, well, so again, we begin with the end in mind. The 7 habits of highly effective people, we talked about that the last time you were on the show. So begin with the end in mind. You have to think about your customer and what do they want, number 1. And then you think about your business and what do you want, okay? Think about that when you're starting your newsletter. So it could be all kinds of stuff. You could put details about upcoming events. You know, let's say you've got an art show coming up, you're speaking at a conference, speaking at a camera club, which is something I need to put in my newsletter and I always forget. Articles that cover important issues or provide valuable information, maybe about just the art world or photography world or something like that. You could give advice on buying art. Give advice on photography. I mean, everybody, maybe even cell phone photography. It's, you know, I got a whole big thing going on cell photography now, teaching so much cell phone photography. You could talk about discounts. If you're a fine art photographer, you're going to be talking about new work, maybe a new series you have coming up, or maybe you completed a series. You could highlight a customer. You could have a picture of, you and the customer, or just the customer with your artwork on their wall. Tell the story of how you met them, something like that, or why they bought your art. They could give a testimonial. You could put testimonials in your newsletter. That's always powerful. You could tell the story of an art piece. This is Marcel's, by the way, if you're watching this. Marcel Semplis is the artist here. He could say, oh, it was, the end of the night, and I was getting bitten by sand fleas, but tell a story about your art. People are interested in that. The story about your art is just as important as the actual art piece. You could talk about framing and why you choose the framing. There's all kinds of things. Anything unique, any angles that you can think of, you want to talk about. Works in progress, upcoming exhibits, personal projects. Highlight a favorite vendor. Maybe the frame shop or the lab you use, and why you use this type of paper on this particular image. Why did you choose black and white on this particular image? People also like personal stuff in moderation.
Yes.
So,
you don't want to spill everything.
Yeah. But if you have kids, it's okay to say, like I have a kid. His website is hotguywithglasses.com. And he just came out with a new album called Born Hot. He's a little bit, that's his shtick. He's really not that arrogant. But, if I put a little blurb about my son has a new album, people like that. They like to know what's going on in my life. Mm-hmm. But if I say, oh, my son did this and my son did that, and he's playing in, every single newsletter, then they would like, what is it? I don't care. They're not into punk rock,
Right.
They don't care about that too much. But little bits of your personal life are nice. So my personal life, people know, like, that my dad died. I put it in the newsletter. Because that was such a big part of my life, and most people, I didn't put that in my newsletter per se, but it was a lot in my Facebook world, because my dad had a very slow decline, so it's been a big part of my life for a long, long time. I think people like that. They want to see a personal side to you.
It helps them relate to you more as a person, and if they like you as a person, they'll like more of a business.
That's a great point. Did I cover enough in there?
I think so.
I mean, I never run out of ideas. And that's something I wanted to say too. When I first started my newsletter, and it was just that one page, it was so hard to come up with what to write. Right now, I have a very big problem with limiting it, because I never run out of ideas. The more you do it, the more ideas you get. Same with this show. When we started doing this show, we came up with like 20 topics, and we're like, oh gosh, that's everything there is. But now, I mean, we keep coming up with, and as we're talking, we come up with ideas for shows and topics. So it's the same thing with a newsletter. The more you do it, it's like exercising a muscle. You get better at it. I'm talking a lot.
You are, but I'm glad, because that means I have to talk less. All right, so you don't just send things right through email. There's software to make everything easier, so you have it grouped and able to be done faster. What kind of software is out there for that?
Okay, first I'm going to answer the question you didn't ask that you sort of did. Why don't you just send it out through your email?
Okay.
Because you're going to be marked as spam. That's the main reason. Because it would be so much easier just to type something up on email and send it out. I haven't tried to do that in a long, long time, but back 100 years ago when I first started, I was on Yahoo, and I tried to send a newsletter out, and they limited how many people you could send it to 50 at the time. And that was probably 20 years ago. Maybe 18 years, no, probably 20 years ago. So that's the first thing. They don't even let you, as you build your mailing list, they don't even let you send it out on Gmail or Hotmail or whatever you're using. But number two, you're more likely to be marked as spam if you have a lot of people in your, in your list. Mm-hmm. So there are software companies, and I'm not smart enough to understand it all, but they know how to get your newsletter into the customer's email without being marked as spam. Sometimes you still are marked as spam, but most of the time it's going right into their email. So MailChimp is free. I recommend MailChimp to start because it is free, and I don't remember exactly how few people you have to have on your list, but I think it's enough. It's like at least, like, I know if you have like 100 people on your list, you can use MailChimp for free. And most people, when they're starting off, they don't even have 100 people yet. You know, they just have 25 people that their newsletter goes to. And that's okay, because it's going to get you in the habit of doing the newsletter, and your newsletter list will build as you go along. So MailChimp is free. It's a good way to start. I started with Constant Contact. It was the big one at the time and still is a very big player in that world. It's pretty easy to use. It's actually harder to use now than it used to be. You know, as they simplify things, it makes it harder. So, but I'm happy with Constant Contact. It's too hard to leave.
Once you get used to some software, it's difficult to change.
And I did try to leave a few years ago. Everybody at that time, GetResponse was real big, which it didn't stay big. It's not the big player anymore, but it wasn't ever the big player, but it was the new, and it encompassed a bunch of different types of softwares that I was paying, that I'm still paying for, like the webinar software and all this other stuff. So I tried it, and they wouldn't accept my mailing list. They accepted maybe 20% of my mailing list because they wouldn't accept any emails that had been in there longer than, I think, 2 years. And I just told you that story about the guy from 10 years ago. I'm not willing to give up those potential customers. So I kind of am stuck with Constant Contact anyway, but I like it. ConvertKit is the big hot one right now. I'm not sure what's so great about it, but on all the podcasts I listen to and all those people, they're all using ConvertKit or Infusionsoft. That's another one. I did look at that too, but to me it looked more complicated. Aweber is another one that's real big. So, but MailChimp is the only one that I know that's free. I think they have free trials.
A lot of them have free trials.
So you might want to try them, but it's a lot of work. So you kind of have to do your research before you decide, I think, and then do the free trial, but kind of already have your decision, because otherwise you're just going to waste a lot of time putting newsletters together and then not liking it.
Okay.
So, because there is a learning curve. There's always a learning curve, because anytime you get a new software, there's a learning curve.
Right.
So.
Okay. So do you have any tips for creating an effective newsletter? We've talked about who to send it to and what to include, but how should we organize it, I guess, to make it effective?
Okay, well, I did touch on this, that you should have a goal. What do your customers want? What do you want? So I always have a goal. So my goal, for instance, I know that this is going to be out after my newsletter, but on the newsletter that I need to get out, like right now, I'm not exactly sure what my main goal is yet, but I know that I'm going to have a Black Friday. I think this is going to be past Black Friday, but I'm going to have a Black Friday sale. So that needs to be kind of a focal point of the newsletter. I want people to start preparing for that. And we have, and I don't know if this is true by the airing of this, but we still have a couple openings for our Everglades trips. And so I need to fill those openings. So that is my goal. I start with my goal. What's my goal? I need to sell the 2 seats to the Everglades trip, or however many it is, and I need to announce the Black Friday. And of course the schedule, I need to make sure that they know the schedule. So I start with my goal and then, think, okay, this is all trying to sell them stuff, right?
And
because
then,
I can't all be all sales.
Right, and then what do you give them? You have to give them little bits, right?
So when I block out my newsletter, I have to have at least 2 educational articles in every newsletter.
Now, do you put the entire article in, or do you just put like a little teaser and a link to where they can read it?
That's a great question. I put a link. So I will do like the first couple of sentences, maybe something like that, and then it says read more, click, and it takes them over to my website. The more you can get somebody on the website, the better.
Absolutely.
You want them on your website. The newsletter's fine, but want them on their website is better. So I try to think about, what do I want? What do they want? And then what Constant Contact has is a little blocks, and I try to keep them short, because that's another reason to not put the whole article in, because nobody wants to read the whole thing. You want to attract their interest, have them click on the article. So I'll have, maybe the first thing will be, hey, we're going to have a Black Friday sale, but the second thing will be metering modes explained, and it'll link to this amazing article that Joe Fitzpatrick wrote, because everybody who's into photography wants to understand metering modes, and not everybody does. So that's a good article. Or it could be, how to have an effective newsletter. There you go. And it could be, linked to the show notes with this video. So I will space the educational blocks in between the sales blocks, all right? So that it's not just selling, selling, selling. But I am selling, selling, selling. And everybody knows that. I'm not trying to hide it. They know I'm trying to sell something, but I want to...
That's why we have a newsletter.
Yeah,
it's a marketing tool.
I'm in business. I mean, people understand that you need to make money in business. Most people anyway. So I don't want it to be too salesy though, so I rotate. And then at the end I put, I put the schedule towards the end, because at this point, if you've been on my mailing list for a long time, you know that the schedule's at the end. So they scroll down for it, and I announce that the schedule's at the end too. I try to make it as personal and conversational as I can. Not as personal, but as conversational as I can, I should say. Like, hi, I'm Peggy. I'm not real formal, because again, it's about people getting to know you, and I'm not, as you know, I'm not a formal person. Maybe if you are a formal person, that's your personality, but I think people like that kind of conversational tone, if you can do it. Again, each little block is short, lots of white space, and what was the word you used?
Breathing room.
Lots of breathing room, lots of pictures. Pictures take me longer. I can put a newsletter together in an hour, but it takes me 4 hours to get the pictures together.
Oh my.
The pictures take me longer than anything, because I have to have good pictures in there that are relevant to the article and eye-catching and varied. Because what if I have a bunch of articles and this one, all landscape photography would fit it? I don't want a bunch of landscape photography in there when I'm teaching different things. So you got to think about that too. There's a lot of little things to think about. Of course, when you start off, it's going to be shorter than mine too.
Right.
So keep that in mind too. The title and the subtitle are probably the most important part of your newsletter.
So you don't want it to sound like spam.
Yeah.
Even if it goes into your regular folder, you don't want it to sound like spam. So it's got to be a little catchy and creative.
So how do you do that?
Well, you could use some sort of pun. You could use alliteration with your name. Have the first letter of each word start with the same letter. It could be rhyming. It could be a variety of things. You just don't want to cross the line into cheesy.
It's got to be something that's going to make them want to open the newsletter.
Right.
Because I can see, that's one of the nice things about Constant Contact, and I'm sure the other companies do this, I can see who opened. Like somebody will say, I haven't gotten your newsletter in so long. So I type their name in there and I look and they're like, well, they just opened the last 10 of them. They just forgot, But, so I can see who opens, I can see what they click on, all that kind of stuff. So why am I telling you that? What was the subject?
Title.
The title. So you got to make sure that you have a title that they want to click on. So you can't just say Understand Photography Newsletter.
Yeah.
I do put that as my subtitle, and I probably need to work on a better subtitle. But my main title usually says, like this one will probably be, Black Friday sale, click for more information or something like that. Or something, it's got to be something that's in the newsletter, first of all,
Okay.
but it's got to be there's got to be a reason for them to open it. So I'm not that good at it yet. In fact, I'm in the middle of, because you turned me on to that travel writing lady, and it's not that I'm interested in travel writing. It's this class that I'm kind of dabbling in. I'm not really formally taking the class. I'm dabbling is a better word. But it's more like a copywriting class, and I feel like that's something that I need to improve on. When we're working on the show, when we come up with titles for the show, this was from another class I took, they had us go into YouTube, like today's show is on newsletters. Mm-hmm. So you would type in YouTube, or I guess you could do this on any search engine, but YouTube was the one that they suggested since we're doing videos here. And you would say, creating a newsletter. And then you look to see what other people titled theirs. And let's say, I don't know, things like 5 tips to creating a newsletter, something like that. People like those words, like, or how to, or people like those kind of words. So if you could put that in your title of your newsletter, that would be good. But anyway, so the YouTube thing, so you come up and let's say you get 20 results. You look to see the difference between how many subscribers they have and how many people clicked. Because if you have 1 million subscribers and only 100 people clicked, then that's not a good title.
Right.
But, because I know you said recently, you said, oh, look, this has 20,000 clicks. But if they have 1 million followers, 20,000 clicks is not good. It should be at least 1 million clicks. That means everybody, or, close to, right?
At least half.
Yeah, so that's a good way to come up with titles too. If you have a subject like that, try that YouTube trick. Well, I don't know that it's a trick, but I thought it was really good advice that I should be using more on my newsletter, because I don't put enough importance on I know it's important, but I'm always under the gun when I do the newsletter. The newsletter takes me a minimum of 5 hours every month, and I am really busy, as you know.
Yes.
And it's hard. It's really hard. And I'm always last minute rushing to get it out. As I said, I stayed up late last night just getting the schedule done so that I could put the newsletter together, because I can't put the newsletter together until the schedule's done. So I don't put enough, but if I had the time, let's say I was newly retired and just going to start off in my fine art career, I would put a lot more time into the title. And I will now, because now I feel embarrassed.
Nothing like making it public.
What else you got?
Well, I know once you get it put together, read through it, have somebody else read through it. Is it something that you would read through? Because if you don't want to read through your own newsletter, if you find it boring, or if it's too wordy, if you don't want to read it, your customers aren't going to want to read it.
That's a good point. Another thing that I forgot about was just talking about color and fonts.
Yes.
Because I believe no more than 2 fonts. That's my belief. I do have my logo, which I guess is a separate font, but I'm not counting that. So I have my logo. Oh, well, we were going to talk about this at the end. But who, what, when, where, how. Every single block should answer those questions. So if you're putting an article that links to a website, you better make sure that link works. Always double check your work. Always, always, always go through every link in there. Even though a lot of my newsletter, at the bottom of my newsletter, I have, I forgot what I called it, but what do I call it with the favorite vendors? Our friends, I think I say our friends and sponsors or something like that. I don't change that. So I have a links to Hunt's photo and video, because they are really good to us and they give us discounts. So I actually put Hunt's discounts in my newsletters when they remember to give them to me, but which they usually do. So I have their discounted stuff down at the bottom, so that's fresh every time. But the very bottom thing, it has a link to their website. It has a link to Southern Photo Technical Services website, a link to the Lemon Tree Inn. If you're staying here in Naples, Florida, we recommend that hotel. It's a little bit boutique hotel, really cute. What else? There are 4 in there. But anyway, sometimes those links just don't work. So every newsletter, I click every single link, and I usually have like 40 links. It's so boring to click through. I click through every link, every newsletter before it goes out. Because you don't know how many, when I was farming that work out to, I've had a lot of people work for me through the years, and I would say, okay, you put the newsletter, here's what I want to say, you put it together. And they wouldn't double click, and then people would say, I clicked and nothing happened. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
You've got to check your work. Who, what, where, when, how, and make sure everything works. So, every article has to have something like an action, what's the word? Like a call to action. So it's either clicking to go to the website, make sure that works, or, clicking to go to your vendors. You have to make sure your name is on your newsletter. How do they contact you if they don't want to click on anything? You better have your phone number on there. You better have your website on there. All that information has to be on there. If you say sign up for these trips, and you don't have even though the website's at the bottom, the website's in the middle, but if it's not in that block, they're going to say, oh, well, I saw you were selling a trip, but I couldn't figure out how to find it. I mean, that's how people are.
They are. If you just would have scrolled. Nope.
No, yeah, they won't. So, as you know, I'm an Airbnb host, and they have a host forum, and it's like, how do we get these people to read our description before they, come to stay with you? They're not gonna. It's like the topic all the time. We're just always trying to figure out how to get people to read the description. So it's the same thing with the newsletter. You want them to read it, and they're going to skim it. That's what they're going to do. They're going to skim it. So you need that white space, and you need to make it so easy for them. So remember that how, what, where. The other thing I thought I forgot to talk about was just the color. Because I do these blocks, I do, and again, the 2 fonts, no more than 2 fonts. I actually only use 1 font, except for some of the headings might be a different color. So I usually do a different color heading, and I bold the headings. And they're my colors. My colors are orange and green. I know that sounds weird, but it looks good. If you get into understandphotography.com, you can tell. So I have orange headlines usually, and then black letters, and then there's a picture in every single article too, and I put the dividers so that you can see clearly the division. But the other thing I do is I have a white background in one article, and then the next block will have like a super light green background or a light gray background, and then the next one will have white, so it's more clear. Each one is a separate block, and again, it's my colors, because I'm keeping my brand the same on my newsletter, the same fonts on my newsletter as the ones I use on my website, so that you have a cohesive brand going on too, because we forgot to talk about that. What else do we talk about? And I talked about wrapping it up. Who, what, where, when, how. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
We covered it all. Everything there is to know about newsletters and more. All right, so that's it for this show.
Episode.
Thank you, Heather Musingo.
Thank you, Peggy Farren, for sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Remember to check out the show notes on understandphotography.com. You'll see, Heather embeds the video right in there. She does bullets of the key talking points, and of course links to anything that we maybe to constant contact, whatever we talk about. I'm Peggy Farren. Thank you so much for watching the Understand Photography Show. We will see you or hear from you next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.